Welcome to the Obvious Leadership Podcast, where we dive into practical leadership insights that are, well, obvious. Your hosts have walked the talk, and now they're sharing their knowledge, strategies, and advice. Let's jump into today's episode and explore the world of leadership with your hosts, Joey and Omar.
How are we doing today?
Oh, man, doing great, man. Fantastic. How about you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Some live stuff happening, but you know how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. So shall we jump into the start of today's topic, or you want to talk about something before we get going?
No, man. Let's jump into it.
All right, cool. So I know yesterday or the other day we were talking about like after the call, right? We were just talking about some things, and the topic of personalities, right? Working with different personalities as a leader came up, and you know we thought that was a good topic to start with. And the anecdote that kind of started off down that journey was a personality test, one that you've taken, one that I've taken, slightly different results, but the one that I've done with my team has been one with 4 birds, right? And those personality traits, you got your eagle, you got your peacock, you got your owl, and then you have your dove. And it's funny to see how people will correlate themselves to that, and understanding as a leader how the different personalities will work together, pros and cons of each one, and how to be able to get your team really to move forward as a unit.
Right.
I know you said you took one as well, and you were surprised, and the person that did it was also surprised about some of the results, right? I know we had a little bit of difference as far as like, should we tell the people? Should we not tell the people? And I'm one I told you, right? I was like, I preferred my team knew and kind of share it. And the way I explained it to them is that, listen, personalities and skills change over time. This is what might be the result as of this moment. This is not a reflection of who you are as a person in a concrete fashion, right? This month you might be a dove, next month you might be a peacock.
Yeah, I mean, so like one of the things that that came up in mind was that, I may not be the best equipped to be a good salesperson, right? And that was one of the underlying messages that the person that gave me that test was trying to, tell me, hey, maybe this isn't something that is a good fit for you. And I said, well, actually, I've been in sales for the last 15 years. And she was surprised to hear that, right? And she said, well, that's exactly why we don't want people making a definitive decision based on the results of these tests, because it's something that you can use. You can find your weakness and then turn that into a strength, and and try and find your mold to any kind of position that you want. So it's good that those things are, it kind of reveals your weaknesses possibly. But also I feel like, it's a great chance for you to kind of overcome some of the things that you may not be doing well in.
Oh yeah. And I told you too that in some of the organizations I've been with in the past, when people have applied for positions, there was a personality test that they would have to take, and it would break down what they're at that moment, right? What their traits were when it came to like following instruction. Were they like a leader? Were they too followy, right? Where whatever you told them is what they were going to do, and they weren't going to take initiative themselves to do things. If they were essentially competent seller, if they're going to need a lot more training. And as a leader, right? Because I've done hiring in rural areas where you don't have options, right? You might post a job up for 30, 60 days, and you might get no more than 5 or 6 applicants that have actually applied. Like,
Right.
you don't get the option to be a chooser, right? Essentially, as a leader in that area, you are a beggar and you're trying to figure out, who best is going to be the fit, because I'm going to have to devote time to train these people up to learn the skill sets. Those personality tests are just a reflection of the answers at that moment in time, and oftentimes could be, especially for like an entry level position, it just, these people don't have either the right background or the right training for the position, which means
Right.
you are going to need to invest more as a leader to make sure that they actually ramp that up.
Right. Correct. And the other thing, like since I recently took that test, one of the things that I found out is, I think I read too much sometimes into those questions. So, it may not have been the most accurate answer.
Yeah.
But it turns out, like when I was reading some of those attributes that I am guilty of, I mean, I was pretty surprised how on point it is, or maybe it's on point with my thought process, but it's not necessarily how I act in a certain sales position or a certain working environment, right? So
All right.
I think especially in a situation where you don't have a lot of applicants and things like that, I think a lot of it is kind of hey, go with your best gut feeling, but then the leader really has to step up and take that person under your wing, right?
Yep.
And develop them to the person that you need them to be, right?
Oh yeah. I know, like some of the people I've had work for me, both as employees and as leaders. Uh, so, and because obviously different generations, right? Different age groups. A lot of the people I've worked with in the past have been gamers. So one of the easiest anecdotes I used to tell them to be able to like relate it is like, listen, it's like playing a video game. You're starting at level 1, right? The person
Yeah.
you're getting is literally starting at level 1. You're hoping for somebody at like level 30 or 40. You're
Right.
starting at level 1. You're going to need to level them up, right? Or like you going into like a leadership position if it's your first time. Like, listen, you might be at like a level 5 out of level 100. Like you're
Right.
going to need to level up, but you have some of the basics to be able to get there. That's why we're looking at you for this, for this promotion. We don't expect you to know everything out of the gate. Uh,
Right.
and I know old school leadership, because I used to butt heads a lot as a recruiter. And like when I started showing, so with one of the districts I had that I used to be in charge of, I had 4 locations. It was arguably one of the smaller districts in the entire company at that point.
Mhm.
Uh, but let me tell you, I would outperform locations or markets that had 7 to 9 locations with my 4 stores.
Wow.
And I used to get on their nerves because I used to throw it in their face like, okay, you got 7, 8, 9 locations, but I literally in volume and performing more out of these 4 locations than you are out of your 7 to 9 locations,
Yeah.
right? And the reason I say that I used to butt heads with them is they were under this mindset that we are only going to bring in A players into this team. They got to be able to hit the ground running. I don't got time to train them. They need to know this essentially within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's cool and dandy. Like that would work back when we were under 200 doors, where we were like a small fish in the market, where we only had maybe 1 or 2 stores, and we had this plethora of people applying.
Mhm.
But think of it this way now. You got, you've upped the number of doors in that market by, 3 to 5 times. Like the pool of employees is not going to increase at that rate. You essentially have the same pool of employees that are, or people that would apply to be an employee. And you're
Right.
just splitting them up now between different locations. And then obviously there's other businesses. Um, so you can't expect to have these people come in and be able to hit the ground running like that. You got
Yeah.
to spend time to invest and train them up and level them up. And knowing where your weaknesses and where your strengths are on your team is going to play a giant role in the success of being able to bring people in. And more importantly, keep them on board. That way you're not losing that same number of people on the back end.
Right. Well, I mean, so and going back to your question about gaming, right? I like to play games as well. Uh, so I think a lot of it kind of relates to the same thing, right? So when you get a new game that you haven't ever played before, you go through some trials to show you how the game works,
Yep.
right? And so you learn new things, and as you go along the game, you learn new things as well. You keep learning new things, right? But
yeah.
that's how the game keeps you engaged with that particular game, right? Because the longer that you're engaged with that game, the more potential money that game is going to make, right? So, but the thing is I think 100% you're on point when it says that, hey, look, we need to give these guys a training. But I think something that maybe is not so much the focus nowadays in leadership is that you have to keep teasing that person with new information so that we keep them engaged to want to perform, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, big time. So kind of going off track, what's one of your favorite games?
Street Fighter, Street Fighter. Yeah, I play a
Street
lot of
Fighter?
Street Fighter. Yeah.
Okay. Old school, like, Nintendo days, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega, or like new style?
Yeah, so Super Nintendo is what I played for a long time, man. Street Fighter 2. But then, they came out with some new iterations back in, I think, 2009, and
Yeah.
they just new one, man. So a lot of different changes, that's for sure.
Okay, cool, cool. So you're the fighter kind of guy. I'm more like the RPG kind of games, right? Like think of like your Final Fantasy games, stuff like that. Uh, and I'm kind of old school. I like my first player shooter games, I should say. And
Yeah.
when I say old school, I'm talking about like old school Counter-Strike,
Okay.
1.6, right? Uh, I played that for, I think I stopped playing it maybe 5 years back,
Yeah.
right? And so,
I have another relation to some of those games, right? You play Call of Duty?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, they have this constant ranking progress, right? So whenever you're playing, you are always leveling up, right?
yep,
And so, when you look around at some of the seasoned salespeople at retail organizations, right? You know that they've been there because they talk with a lot of experience and things like that.
oh yeah,
But honestly, I feel like sometimes a lot of them get burnt out because they have a lot of the accolades to go with the knowledge that they have, right? And so a lot of retail organizations don't offer some kind of recognition program to say, hey, this person's been with us for 15 years and look at the things that they have mastered, right? Like wear it on your shirt, like show it to everybody. Hey, look, I am an expert in this. This it come, use me as a resource. But I feel like that's a big miss when it comes to retail.
oh yeah, and it's not just that, but think of it this way: when you lose tenured employees, whether it's because you're doing massive layoffs or because people are burnt out and are just leaving in mass because the company is not doing in their eyes what they could be doing, what they should be doing, right? It's not that you're just losing that skill set, you're also losing a ton of tribal knowledge that is not in the books. There's no SOPs on this. It's all stuff that they've been able to pass down verbally, to their peers. And now you're losing all of that information, and it just makes life essentially almost harder because you would be surprised how much information is passed through as essentially like tribal knowledge
Right.
that, I mean, should honestly be SOPs, but nobody's really thought about it. And everybody's kind of like taking it for granted that, oh, hey, these are the SOPs. This is how it actually works.
Right. Right. And I mean, it's sad to say, man, but like honestly, so you think about things like monthly conversations or quarterly conversations or
Yeah.
annual conversations. Those things are kind of like a rinse and repeat process, right? It's the same questions over and over, right? It's not really tenured to the employees term of how much experience they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that employee's like, well, what does this have to do with me? You know what I mean? Like, what I I wish that there was a progressive check-in, based on that employee's knowledge, based on how much they've experience, maybe in different departments and things like that. I mean, I think that would definitely, if it was a more meaningful personal conversation, I think people would, get a little bit more out of it.
Oh yeah, and honestly, that really comes down to more the leaders in those positions aren't really trained to do that. That
Yeah.
comes down to, in my opinion, right? It comes down to, okay, this is just another checklist that we need to say that we've done this and completed this,
Right.
uh, for whatever case, right? We'll put it in the file, we have it check marked, and boom. Because I've been through that. I've been through, quarterlies and annuals and different organizations where that's what it felt like. But then you have those conversations where it's a lot more meaningful about where you're currently at, where your progression, where you want to progress to, and what the reality is to be able to do that, right? Meaning, okay, to be able to get this or to get to this position or to get to this, these are like the 2 or 3 big skill sets that you're missing on right now. You have this foundation, but these are the skill sets that you're missing. Try these or contact these resources to get a little bit more information, right? To be able to fill the void.
Yeah.
And as a leader, that you don't have to know all the answers, right?
Right.
But if you can help to point your team in the right direction to be able to get that, like that's going to be huge. And understanding where your shortcomings are, and it's okay. And I feel that a lot of leaders, I don't think it's okay. Like we
Yeah.
say it all the time, but like deep down, I think it's more like a pride thing that, well, I've been in a leadership role for 5, 10 years with this organization. Like I should know.
Yeah.
No, I don't know that, but I do know or might know like a resource you can turn to that will have a better understanding, right? Let me touch base with them and let them know that you're going to be in contact with them. Boom.
Well, and better yet, man, you've been with this organization 5, 10 years. I know my people better than I know my job. I mean, that's the conversation we want to be having, right? And saying that, I know my people, I know it, I know where their strengths are. And, you need help with something, I can point you in the right direction. It may not be me every time, but, definitely find you the answer. I 100% agree with that, man.
Oh yeah. And I mean the reality too, and we all know this. We've been through it. Uh, the change is constant, right? People are going to change roles. They're going to change companies. The economy is going to change. Technologies are going to change. Like it's change is always going to be constant. So like truly understanding your resources, you don't that is such like key skill sets to really have.
Yeah.
Because you have kind of an idea of where you can turn to, and you're not afraid to ask. That's really what it shows me, is that you're not afraid to turn and ask somebody for assistance, right? Because that's really how you're going to understand where your resources are, especially within an organization that's constantly changing or evolving.
Yeah. I mean, I've always had in my position as managers, I've always had, some people always ask me, hey man, like why is it you always point me in the right direction? You never can give me an answer. And I say, well, it's for a couple reasons, right? Sometimes the answer that I have may have changed, so, and I don't want to give you the wrong information. I'm going to give you the resource to go and find that information. And hopefully you'll report back to me and say, hey, look, this is the way I did this. Right. So that way we're both armed with the correct information going forward. Right. And also I've the right resource.
And that's actually funny because I was just doing a video on this part as far as like the best way for somebody to truly understand the information is not for you as the individual to tell that person the information. It's to have that person, especially a person on your team that may not be the best at grasping new concepts, new info, or new trainings. Have them be the one that conveys the information to others, right? To you and to the rest of the team. Because by them teaching that information, now they're really absorbing a lot more of that because they're themselves doing it, right?
Yeah. So it depends on the personality, man. And man, that's right up my alley, man, because, I feel like once you learn something enough to teach it,
Uh,
that's when you have a really good grasp on it, right? Not
oh yeah.
only do you have a grasp on it, but you believe in it, right? You believe in the process, you believe in, whatever it is that you've done research enough to teach it. Because, a lot of times if you're a passionate teacher, right? Like we had said before, right? Everybody wants to be a teacher, everybody has the ability to be a teacher, everybody wants to be a leader, right? But
Yeah.
you need to be ready for the questions that may come from the crowd that you're teaching, so that you can answer some of those questions, and sometimes it leads to a new level of understanding of that topic.
No, that's big time true. Uh, and back to that point of like having get that knowledge, you would be surprised. I'm actually right now trying to look for. It's called the cone of learning. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Mhm.
Um,
I've heard of the cone of shame. That's
Squirrel. My kids love that movie. It's funny because I didn't think they would because how much they actually talk in the movie,
yeah.
right? My kids are more about like action, but no, surprisingly they like Up. My son thinks that's what's the old man's name? Uh,
No, kids would kill me if I don't remember.
yeah, he thinks he's like the funniest old man in the world.
Mr. Frederickson.
Yes, there we go. Uh, that's like one of the biggest things. All right, here we go. Let's try it this way. Oh, that picture looks bad. Because the cone of learning, the first time I came around it, um, like to learn about it, was actually through a book.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing was like how true it was, because I've seen it, I've like understood the concept, and it's just like, all right, this is like the information you're going to retain the most isn't
Yeah.
by learning it through somebody else, it's by essentially doing it, right? Uh,
Okay.
let me
So you're telling me hands-on learning is one of the best ways to learn?
right?
It's one of the things as a manager, and that I used to talk about was it was called ask them to do it, show them how to do it, then review, right, how they did it, and apply changes going forward.
Oh yeah. And like, so here we go, right? Can you see it on your screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, and this is kind of, it falls in line with that, right? Because as you go down the pipe, and on this one they have it reversed, right? But it's still the same concept. So you're more likely to retain 10% of what you read, right? So 10% of what you read, 20% of what you hear, 30% of what you see. And keep this in mind. Think of this as like virtual trainings, right? A lot of companies do virtual trainings, and it's very, very passive. You'll see on there's 50% of what you see and hear, but what a lot of people don't realize is if the content is not boring and it's interactive, right? So think of it like a movie that you watch. How often do you retain the information? Like 50% of a movie that you found super boring,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I think I watched it and I didn't like it. Like,
Yeah.
okay. But if it was a movie that you're excited about, you can't stop talking about it. It caught your attention. You're not going to remember every single detail, but you remember enough to be able to almost explain the entirety of the movie to somebody, right? All those spoilers. But then you get down to like the bottom, participating in a discussion, right? You're not being told, you're actually communicating, you're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And then the dramatic presentation, the simulation, or actually doing the real thing. Like I'm a big proponent and I love it. I know people hate it, doing role plays.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the reason I say that is I don't do a role play to do a role play. And I'm not going to have you do a role play in front of like the entire group. Don't get me wrong. I have done that in like district meetings and stuff just to make a point. Uh, But when I do a role play, it's typically I want to understand how much you know. So I'm going to have you come at me as though I'm I'm the customer, and your goal is to try to offer this particular product or service. I don't want to see how well you offer that product. I want to see how well you're transitioning into that product,
Yeah.
right? Because I want to understand what your flow is. Because oftentimes it's not bringing up that item. If you bring it up, you're probably going to close more than not. It's
Yeah.
how you transition it, because that tells me how comfortable you are with it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we've covered part of this before, man, in talking about how, when we go through all those trainings at a employee orientation, like you're reading a lot about, hey, this is how you do this. This is our expectation on that. You follow these steps and, all of a sudden you're done with the sale, right? That's how the training goes, right? And it walks you through the whole interaction and, oh man, this seems, pretty easy, right? And you come out of training and you sit down at the desk or you get in front of a customer and you're like deer in the headlights, right? Because you're like, oh man, this is a real life situation, and the conversation didn't start the way that it said it would in training, right? So what do I do? I fill that gap, right? And so I think 100% that role plays are an essential tool to getting somebody up to speed, getting them that experience. And I know it's uncomfortable. I know people hate doing it, but like one of the things that I used to do for people that were looking for the growth, that wanted to land a job with management and things like that,
Yeah.
or whatever position that they were looking for, is I'd tell them, hey, like when's the last time you done an interview? And they're like, oh man, it's been like 5 years or whatever it is. I said, okay, well, you have this interview next week. Like, what are you doing to prepare? They're like, oh, I got my resume done. I was like, okay, well, like what about some questions? Like, have you gone through some of the questions? Like, nah, I think I got it. Like, I'm a great interview person. I'm like, well, like you think about, riding a bike. You haven't rode a bike in 5 years and you jump on one, like you think you're gonna, just keep going right off the start. And a lot of times, sometimes I get people to say, yeah, well, maybe we can do some practice, or a quote unquote role play, right? But and every time I do that for somebody, like I do it once and they're like, oh, okay, thanks a lot. And then they'll come back the next day like, hey man, can we do that again? I'm like, yeah, like let's go through it again. And it seems like, oh well, like their answers to this particular question got better. And it's really about the comfortability of them being able to be put on the spot for the different questions and come up with their answers to make it seem like, hey, look, this is me. Because truth be told, a lot of times we don't talk about ourselves very often, right? And one of the things is that if you can't talk about how you achieve something, maybe it was a fluke, right? And so if you've been a top performer for the past 5 years, but you can't talk about how you've been a top performer, like were you just doing it based on the company SOP? Probably not. But you have to be able to talk about the different things that you do to make yourself like what makes you successful.
Yeah, big time. And to your point, the doing multiple role plays, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest miss when it comes to trainings, is they give you the information once. It's here you go. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
There is no follow-up to ensure that you understand. There is no reoccurring training, right? Reoccurring coaching, essentially.
Right.
Because the way I like to explain it is, your sales team, they're your star athlete players. When's the last time that your professional team said, screw training, we're just going to wait till game day and we're just going to perform?
Right.
Can you imagine how terrible that'd be?
Well, there's some professional teams that I think do that. Not just play.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, right?
I mean, even though those teams like are not performing as well, they do hit the gym. They do go through training sessions, day in, day out, weekly, on a weekly basis, at whatever their regimen is, man. But I mean, like it's true, man. Like you can't just go out and into the game, without any kind of
training.
Right, exactly. You got to have a game plan. I mean, like everybody needs a game plan, man. Everybody needs a refresher, and then to to that example, hey, we need to come up with a fresh new play, right? We need a new approach to how we're doing things, right? To change with the scenarios.
Yeah, and to that, like it might be like a new play, but the basics, the fundamentals are going to be the same. It's just the approach is going to be different of when you do this and do that.
Right.
And that's like the biggest thing. We had talked about it the other day, how one of the organizations I was with spent like millions of dollars to get a consultation, right, from a global consulting firm, only for them to come back and say, yes, you need to focus on these three basic principles, right? And it's like, well, no, duh, it's the same thing we told you. Like, these are the principles we need to focus on. Like, make it simple. Don't keep trying to make this elaborate thing and adding all these layers. Make it simple, and that's it.
Yeah.
But that's where your success is going to lie, is by doing like the core principal actions on a consistent basis and making sure you have a strong foundation there, because then you can build on that and you can make adjustments in real time in the game during the play.
Yeah.
As opposed to your point, feeling like you're a deer in headlights. Oh, snaps, what do I do now? Right.
Well, like, man, I have a whole bunch of scenarios running through my head now. When you think about like football, right?
Yeah.
The goal is to get the ball in the end zone, right? Either side of the field, whatever it is, right? And so if you put that on paper and say, hey, look, this is the goal, to get the ball down to the end zone, right? And here are the rules that you need to play by. Well, then you go out there and you're like, oh man, like it's that easy. You hike that ball and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what am I doing? Like who do I pass the ball to? Like everybody's running around and not coordinated. Nobody's really going to get anywhere, right? You're not going to move that ball further down the field. And, so really, yes, that is the end goal. Yes, we do want to get that score on the scoreboard, but really it's about what you do on the field to get the ball to the end zone.
Oh yeah, big time. And so there's a book by his name is Charles Duhigg, right? It's called The Power of Habits. And he does make that anecdote towards football in there, because his thing isn't writing about like hypotheticals. It's actually it's essentially a big old research that he did on psychology, the psychology of habits, and how subconsciously and unconsciously our habits not only define who we are, but what we do and how we do things. More importantly, how those habits can be changed, and it's the very small habits that you do daily that are actually the big changers. And he talks about, there's a football coach that his thing, he wanted to go from, I think he was a defensive coach to be a lead coach, a head coach. And every single time he got interviewed was, all right, so what I'm proposing is that we focus on the basics, right? These guys got to the professional level by understanding the game, and they have really good foundation. I don't want to switch everything around, and essentially lose the skills that they've developed. What I want to do is I want to refine their skills and give them the opportunity to make those adjustments on field. And after he was given the opportunity to, head up, he actually went to the semifinals, I think, in his first year, and in like the next 5 years won the Super Bowl a couple of different times. Right? Yeah. And it was all from a very small change. And the key thing, and this is where a lot of people don't realize, there's a part of the book where he talks about people with Alzheimer's, right? And obviously Alzheimer's, it's not a fun thing if you know anybody that's gone through it. People forgetting, simple little things. But he talks about how this one individual, even in a changing environment, right? They moved from one house to a different house. He couldn't remember anything past, like, I think it was 5 minutes. He still knew where the bathroom was. He knew where the kitchen was. He knew how to make him sandwiches. He knew his way around his home by taking walks on his own. And it would scare the crap out of people. And one of the researchers was like, how do you know this? And he was like, I don't know, I just know. And the thing is, he had been doing it so much that subconsciously his body had retained his body and his mind had retained that information without him like truly knowing it. So as long as there's like no change in the environment when he went on his walks, he would know how to find his way home.
That's
right?
crazy.
And like his wife didn't even know he was going on walks until he started showing up with like random objects at the house. And that's when she realized, like, oh, snaps, like he's actually leaving the house on his own.
Yeah.
Which, if you know anybody with Alzheimer's, is a very scary thought.
Yeah.
But like the power of habits, and this is like, it goes back to role playing and training, you constantly do it. It's not a one-time thing, it's a constant thing, because you're essentially training those muscles to retain that information. So when it comes down to the day of or the play of, you don't have to actively consciously think about it. It's just a habit, and you're able to do it and focus on other things in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, so to even go back further into our conversation, right? If you know that person's or that employee's ability or their personalities, right, then you can even have a more effective role play, or maybe disguise the role play, because maybe that person's an eagle or whatever it is, that's or that's a peacock that's really confident, right? And they're like, no, I don't want to do a role play. But if you know that person has that kind of mentality, like maybe you can work around the role play, or like make it not a full role play, but do little segments, you know what I mean, and approach it in a different way. And that's that situational leadership, right? Depending on who you're talking to. So it all kind of flows together, you know what I mean? Like you got to know the action plan, you got to know the basics, but you also have to know how to relay those things to the people that you're trying to get that message to.
Oh, big time. I 100% agree with you. And that it's so important as a leader to have that adaptability to your team. You can't be a rigid leader. This isn't, the freaking 1950s where, this is the only management style we're going to do, and you have to adapt to me. It's like, no,
Right.
you need to adapt to your team to understand, where they're at and what they're missing. Because as a leader, whether the team succeeds or the team fails, that's not the team, that's you.
Right.
And when the team wins,
those gaps.
Yeah. And that's huge. But and that's always, I think, for a lot of organizations, the biggest miss. Because oftentimes you do get people, and especially like in retail environments, you get people that get promoted not because of the skill set, but because maybe favoritism, that's a big one, or seniority. I've been here for a while, so in theory I should know more, but in practice I guarantee there's probably somebody else that knows the material and actually knows the stuff better than that person that got promoted because of seniority.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, man. I know that sometimes it's hard to define a leader, right? But you also have to make sure that the person that's going into that position is not just the person that has, the best numbers day in and day out, but they can explain, kind of how they got there, right? We don't want it to be we've talked about, the different locations and their performance and things like that, right? Where are they coming from? Are they coming where, hey, look, everything was kind of force fed to them, and all they had to do was swipe a credit card. You know what I mean? Like sometimes that's what the situation brings, right? And that person is a really good performer when it comes to numbers, but we need to look at the whole story. You know what I mean? Like I think most definitely, when it comes to hiring leadership, a lot of times I know a lot of it boils down to performance, right? But unfortunately, sometimes performance doesn't always equate to, hey, look, will this person be able to teach these basic habits to make everybody successful and be able to, cater that to the different personalities.
Oh yeah, big time. And on that note, bro, I think that's actually a good topic for us to start up for the next one, right?
Cool.
So I just want to say, guys, thanks for stopping by, watching us. Let us know what comments, questions you guys have. Anything you want to leave off with, Joey?
No, man, I'm really enjoying these talks, man. Yeah, most definitely. I'd like some feedback on some different things that, you like to overcome as a leader, so that we can discuss it and, put it out all on the table, and hopefully we come up with a game plan.
Sweet. All right, Joey. Thanks for joining.
All right, man.
Take care, guys.
Have a good
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.